Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our final event in VOCEL's Power of Community campaign. My name is Jessie Ilhart, and I'm the Executive Director of VOCEL, Viewing Our Children as Emerging Leaders. I'm thrilled to welcome you to the third and final event in our campaign, the Power of School Leaders. With the Power of Community campaign, we're lifting up and celebrating the adults who make the most impact in young children's lives, including parents and caregivers, teachers, and school leaders. We're also highlighting the way that VOCEL centers that value of community in all of our work, helping adults learn from VOCEL's expertise and also from each other. And when I was a little girl, my oldest cousin, Michelle, who I absolutely idolized, became an elementary school teacher. And then about a decade later, she became an elementary school principal. And I watched as she poured her heart and soul into those students and her teachers and her staff. And without a doubt, her love for education really impacted my decision to work in this field. She was my first real example of the difference that a principal can make. And over again since then, and especially since starting VOCEL's work with Chicago Public Schools and all of the leaders that you'll hear from tonight, I have seen again and again just how much school leaders matter. So I couldn't be happier that we're closing out our campaign tonight with a discussion with school leaders. And I want to thank all of our Power of Community sponsors, especially Lindy and Michael Kaiser, who are the presenting sponsors of the entire Power of Community campaign, and Lindy Hirschsohn and Chris Coetzee, who are the presenting sponsors of tonight's Power of School Leaders event. And Lindy Hirschsohn is a longtime board member and was recently recognized by Cranes as a notable nonprofit board leader. I know that I'm incredibly grateful for her strategic guidance and tireless, passionate support of VOCEL. And I think that we have Lindy here with us tonight. So thank you, Lindy, for everything. And thank you to all of you who are joining what I hope will be an inspiring and educational 45 minutes. I'm going to start off tonight sharing a quick overview of VOCEL's core beliefs and our approach to supporting school leaders. And then I'll bring in a panel of incredible principals who will continue this conversation. But to kick things off, I want to start by building some community among those of us who are here tonight in the chat box. So if you're somewhere where you can type, I know it's that kind of dinner hour, so some of you might not be able to, but if you are, please feel free to share where you're joining us from and what it would mean for you and your city if everyone felt a stronger sense of community. So if you're joining from Chicago, what would it mean for Chicago if everyone here felt a stronger sense of community? So go ahead and share that in the chat as we get started. That'll help build some community among those of us here tonight. And also, throughout the presentation and during the panel, you can share any questions or comments you have in the chat box. We have members of our VOCEL team who are here ready to answer those questions or to bring them to our panelists if we have time. Begin and get started, at VOCEL, we believe a few things. We believe that first, all children can thrive, but not all children are thriving in Chicago today. So it's said that in Chicago, no matter what social inequity you're tracking, there's only one map. So the same families that are lacking access to quality healthcare and jobs and bearing the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic are also facing inequitable access to early care and learning experiences during those first 5 years of life. And we know that those early years are the most important for brain development. So without access to those early learning experiences, 77% of children from low-income households start kindergarten behind. And the research tells us that in many cases, they never catch up. We also know that thriving children need an ecosystem of extraordinary adults. So parents, caregivers, school leaders, teachers. All of these adults can have a massive impact on children's brain development. Their work shapes the architecture of a child's brain, which then in turn impacts how that child learns in school and how they relate to others. So it's really not an overstatement to say that these folks in this ecosystem have a lifelong impact on children and thus on our society. And at VOCEL, we work hand in hand with investors, donors, supporters, and partners across the city to make this work happen. Third, we believe that all adults can be extraordinary with the right knowledge, tools, and a community of support. So those three beliefs are the foundation of all of our programs, our Child Parent Academy and Powered by VOCEL programs, which work with parents and caregivers, the Early Educators for Thriving Children Fellowship, which works with teachers, and the Building Early Learning Leaders program for school leaders, principals, and assistant principals. Tonight, we're focused on our work with school leaders. And it's really an underappreciated story that Chicago students and schools have made remarkable progress over the past decade. And experts at places like the University of Chicago Consortium on School Research believe that Chicago's approach to empowering strong school leaders has been a huge part of that progress. So compared to other large school districts, Chicago principals have a greater degree of autonomy, and the evidence shows that school leaders who have the flexibility to invest in their teachers and invest in professional development, support their teachers in various ways, see the strongest gains in student achievement. So that's been especially true at the middle school and high school levels. At the same time, Chicago has been expanding the number of schools that are offering pre-K programs for the youngest learners, 3, 4, 5-year-olds. And we've heard from strong school leaders that they don't always know the right ways to support the earliest learners in their schools. So that's why 2 years ago, we launched the Building Early Learning Leaders, or Belle program, which brings together school leaders, principals, assistant principals to learn from VOCEL's expertise and to learn from one another. This program is really designed to increase school leaders' early childhood content knowledge and also strengthen their instructional leadership through group-based learning and individual school coaching and consultation that's rooted in both research and relationships. So this year, 12 school leaders and their teams will be participating in Belle, which is a major expansion that's made possible by the Education Equity COVID-19 Response Fund, which is a collaborative effort among education philanthropies, including CME Group Foundation, Crown Family Philanthropies, Robert R. McCormick Foundation, and the Staines Family Foundation. And two of our panelists, who I'll introduce in just a few minutes, are participating in the Belle program this year. In addition, though, to investing in their teams, strong school leaders also seek to bring strong partnerships to their schools to provide that additional support that can really open doors for students and families. So at VOCEL, we are proud to be a partner to 20 schools across the South, West, and Southwest sides of Chicago through the VOCEL Child Parent Academy. And through this program, we work with families of young children ages 0 to 3 who will eventually become students in their neighborhood schools. In that program, our teachers and family support specialists meet with parents and their children once a week in small groups. So first, the parents and children spend time together with teachers, where our teachers can model and demonstrate best practices with children. Then we also have time for parents to meet in community with one another every week without their children, where they can find common challenges, find support from one another, have that moment to connect, lean on one another, and really strengthen themselves and their relationships. And then we also extend the support to home and keep learning going by providing brain bags for families that are filled with tools for at-home learning. And we provide text messages that have parenting tips and reminders that are really aligned to the curriculum of our program and all that families are learning in the classes. And as with Belle, two of our panelists tonight have also hosted the Child Parent Academy at their schools. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. I mentioned earlier that there's this ecosystem of extraordinary adults that are really needed for young children to thrive. So tonight, I'm thrilled to be joined by three of those extraordinary individuals, three amazing school leaders. We have Ty Basurto, who is the principal of John C. Dore Elementary and a participant in our Belle program for school leaders. We have Javier Arriola-Lopez, who is the principal of Rachel Carson Elementary, which has hosted one of our Child Parent Academy sites. And we have Joyce Pay, who is the principal of the Chicago Academy Elementary School, who has hosted one of our Child Parent Academy sites and is also participating in the Belle program. Thank you, all of you, for being here. And I'm going to switch this up a little bit so we can see your faces. Wonderful. So Javier and Joyce have both been partnering with VOCEL through the Child Parent Academy from well before the pandemic. So I'm curious to hear from both of you. Maybe we'll start with Javier. What was the impact of the Child Parent Academy on students and families in your school community?
So when VOCEL approached me, there was a time when Chicago Public Schools decided that some schools, students who were 3 years old were not going to be able to join our pre-K. So you kind of saved the day by providing that support to the community. But I think it was the most exciting part when you mentioned that it can be 0 age months and on. I think that was like, wow, can have an impactful way of helping the students. The other thing that I think I also liked a lot was our school is a dual language. So it was exciting that you were providing the support in the language that the students' first language is Spanish. It also impressed me the kind of developing leaders as young as little ones, right? So the idea was how can we build those skills that they need so they become leaders by building the bond between the parent and the child through education, through learning, both of them learning, the student and the parent. It was exciting to see the impact that they were going to have in the community and the impact that was going to have also in the family when they will go back to the home and they were talking about what was happening. I think it was kind of the perfect support to provide in the school because as you saw in the video or in the pictures that Jesse presented, the parents and the students first join together the learning, and then each one of them, for the second hour, they get separated and each one of them get a specific learning. So not only will the students will be learning, something basic about who they are and who they are as learners and also experimenting their environment, but also the parents were learning as well. So it has all the ingredients to be successful. It had all the ingredients to kind of even improve our community. So of course I say, yes, when do we start? Because that was something that I could see the impact beyond the school here into that community. And also oftentimes, most of our parents are Hispanic parents, not necessarily immigrant, but they need also all those skills to be productive in their community. And I know that VOCEL was going to be providing that support to them so that they can overcome some obstacles they might have. So the impact is beyond just helping the parent and the child, I think in the family and also in the community. So I appreciated that.
Great, thank you, Javier. And I'm curious, Joyce, if you've been a longtime partner of the Child Parent Academy, one of our earliest partners. I'm curious if you've seen similar impacts or kind of what difference you've seen the Child Parent Academy make for your school.
Yeah, similar to Javier, I think the impact has really been more than we anticipated. We, of course, were excited to bring a program that would involve our families and bring in children that we normally did not serve, this age group that we hadn't even thought to serve, right? And I think the biggest impact for me, the most changing experience for me was that I didn't understand how VOCEL would impact our larger school community. And that really was illustrated for me in kind of one interaction where one of our parents who had a student in our upper grades, our intermediate grades, also had students in VOCEL. And she had noticed that there was an issue. Her student was in conflict with his classmates, and she brought it up to VOCEL. And they gave her all the tools that she needed to be able to have that discussion with us at the school level and to help us to better understand her perspective so that we could resolve it together. And that's when I understood, like, wow, this is not just about equipping our kids with these tools, but it was also drawing our families into our community in a way that I don't think that we could have.
Thank you for sharing that, Joyce. And I think that illustrates one aspect of VOCEL's, all of our programs, right? That being rooted in relationships is so important. And I remember that situation, and I think the reason, right, that families feel safe to bring up things that they're concerned about, right? It might be intimidating to bring something to a school principal, but to be able to talk about it first with a trusted support system, and then to bring it to a school leader is great to have that happen. So I'm curious to go next, and maybe we can start with Ty, talking a little bit about the past couple years, and now, what are the challenges that you see facing students and families in your schools? What have you seen that students and families really need now?
Jesse, is this in light of pandemic recovery specifically? Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I think that for me, the responsibility that comes along with working with children is so great, right? Like, these are our most important citizens. If we get this wrong, you know, we're impacting our future. And so I take this work, just like, you know, Joyce and Javier, very seriously. But the stakes have been raised as a result of the pandemic, because what once felt very safe no longer feels safe. You know, the world doesn't feel safe. And we've seen a decline in enrollment in Chicago public schools across the board. And some of that is because families need security that, you know, they're not sure that they can get at schools. So in terms of need, I think I see an increase in our need to bridge what happens at school and at home, so that families feel confident sending their kids to school and knowing that they're cared for, they're safe, and they're healthy.
Yeah, Javier and Joyce, have you seen those same needs for safety? What else have you seen now amidst the pandemic?
Okay, I was waiting for Joyce to say she. I think in addition to what Ty mentioned, it's true about the declining of the attendance of student membership. And it was accentuated last year. I think we saw it with our early grades, like pre-K. That's I always measure the success of future grade levels by having very fewer students. Also, the most affected students were the early students, like first grade, second grade. They're the ones that had the most attendance issues, or not showing up, or we wondering where happening. But there were also other issues like trauma. You know, this is a global trauma. Us also being in trauma because we were surviving last year. So I think it impacted the whole ecosystem in the school. Everyone, nobody was untouched, every one of us. So I think that we had to continue work together to bring the healing that is needed and the strength, because to be honest with you, I think we're tired too. I think the administrators in Chicago, we never stopped. We just kept on going and going and going and going. As to your physical body, till you stop, you need to take care of yourself. So I think that I appreciate the system. Chicago Public Schools has put a lot of emphasis on self-care, and I was neglecting that even before the pandemic. Now I think we need to take care of ourselves first before we can take care of other people. So, and like Ty said, we take our job so seriously that I think is critically important that we are okay so that everyone else is okay as well. So I think that part of it, I think the issues that we are seeing right now with the children and the teacher is just a surface level. I think we still need to be very strategic in providing the social emotional support that they need. And if the parents are not okay, of course, the children are not okay either. So we need to continue supporting them and providing the support that they have. So I was grateful that VOCEL, just want to say one more thing, I was grateful that VOCEL continue their program during the pandemic, and it is still going on in the pandemic. I think our students need that kind of support system ongoing, even if it's online. I appreciate that, so I want to thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I love what you said, Javier, about if the parent's not okay, that the child is not going to be okay, right? There's that reciprocal relationship and how important it is to work with that whole family. Joyce, what about for you? What have you seen for students right now amidst the pandemic? And especially in terms of learning, coming back to school for many of them, what's been challenging about that?
I think we were all nervous, and I'm sure that everybody has seen in the news reports this fear of like how much learning loss our kids would have. We're as administrators, we're always nervous about the summer slide, and this is a far cry from that. And one of the things that I was really encouraged by in the beginning was how our older students were doing. It seemed like that learning loss that we had anticipated wasn't really hitting as hard as we thought. And then our primary data started to come in, and we realized that those kindergarteners who had never come into our building, the first graders who were just beginning to learn to read, their gaps were a lot wider than our older students. And it's not surprising. Their learning was interrupted in this most formative time where they're learning to read. And some families were able to access resources to help their students. Some families were able to impart that knowledge of reading, and some families weren't able to do that. And remote learning is just really not the most conducive tool to learning how to read. They got very good at muting and unmuting, particularly unmuting when they weren't supposed to. But we did notice there was a significant gap for our first graders. And now we're looking at what we need to do to accelerate that learning.
And I think that's so important that you bring up around the learning to read, because one of the pieces we believe at VOCEL is that is a process that really starts from birth, right? And Javier brought this up earlier. We start our programs at 0. There was a mom who joined our Child Parent Academy the other day and sent a screenshot with her 7-week-old, right? And she was saying, but that program's for her, right? It's for her to learn what's needed so that her child is ready to read. And so I think for children who also missed out on pre-K, K, right? There's some foundational pieces of learning there. I'm wondering also, Joyce, if you can speak a little bit to the social emotional. What did you see there in terms of kids coming back without some of those years of socialization?
Yeah, I think that's there's been a lot of articles lately about this too. And I think that I see Javier and Ty immediately smiling and nodding their heads as well. We've seen more conflicts than usual. And, we have a lot of theories about why this might be. One, the prolonged isolation and not being able to interact with your peers just doesn't give you the practice that you need to have those social interactions. And without the mediated guidance or the proactive teaching of social emotional skills too, we just know that students are going to get into more conflicts. And the second thing is, it is so wonderful to have all of our students back, but masking has also really made it difficult for our students to interpret social cues. And so when you only have this, it's very easy to misinterpret something that might have been accidental. And so we're seeing conflicts actually escalate really quickly from something that could have been very minor in the past to something that, like, has a very emotional outburst. We're seeing that particularly in our pre-K students and our kinder students. And we're also seeing just the increased need for helping our students figure out calm down strategies, mediating with them and explaining and having them gain the language of saying, this is how I'm feeling, because their facial cues can't be read by their classmates.
Yep. And it's interesting thinking about those calm down strategies, right? The coping strategies that young children might need. We as adults might need those more now than ever. And I think Javier was mentioning around the self-care that's needed and how principals have not stopped going. And I'm curious, maybe you could speak to this as well. What has it been like being a school leader amidst a pandemic? Kind of what do you need, or what have you needed?
That's a really heavy question, because every school leader that I know doesn't see this as just a job. It's a vocation. It's something that we've been called to do. And with that comes great responsibility in that this is a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week job. Currently, we have to flip classrooms, and sometimes that happens at 10 o'clock at night when you're about to go to bed. So it's hard to really gauge what self-care is, because the truth is we've probably never had it, because we have always been people who have stayed late when the child isn't picked up and who have arrived early to make sure that everything is set up for the professional development that we're going to lead, or whatever it is. But I think in terms of thinking about what is it like right now, Janice Jackson, former CPS CEO, I was at an event maybe in the last few months that she was speaking at, and she talked about her fierce optimism. And I'm really trying to stay grounded in that, because in 19 years in education, either as a teacher or as an administrator, I have never experienced the challenges that I am facing this year. Student behavior, the academics do not seem as large a concern as I had anticipated. I lead a pre-K through 8th grade school that has 2 campuses. And I thought that I was ready for this good fight, and the last 2 years were difficult, but this coming back has been far more challenging than I anticipated. And, but I, remain grounded in this fierce optimism that it is going to get better, and that we are doing the right thing for children, and that having kids in school is better than having them online. And I also take a lot of comfort in being a part of communities where I am with other school leaders who are facing those same challenges. And, Belle is one of those places where I can problem solve, vent, cry, laugh, do all of those things. So I don't have the formula for like, what does our self-care look like? I know that every day I wake up not knowing what it is that I'm facing as I go into work, but I leave here sometimes at 4 p.m. and sometimes at 8 p.m. feeling like we're on the right path.
Yep. And you alluded to that power of community, right? The name of this campaign, but that power of community, and the fact that Belle is, VOCEL's effort to play our part and provide that supportive community and guidance on best practices as well. So you told us a little bit about what that's been like for you, Ty. I'm curious, Joyce, you're also participating in Belle. What has that been like for you, being a part of that community?
It's really been great. It's been cathartic because it's nice to know that some of the things that sometimes you feel like your school community is going through are just unique to your school community. But to sit down with other leaders and, you know, other early childhood educators and say like, wow, okay, we're all going through this together. And, you know, you have a little piece of information and you have a little piece of information. And by our powers combined, we can figure out a more unique solution for these challenges that we're encountering. It gives you a little bit more strength to know that, like, this is something, yeah, this is, we're in the midst of a global pandemic still. And we're doing things that no one has ever had to do before. And that it's wonderful to not only be in a space where we can problem solve together, but we can also take a moment to say, yeah, you know, these challenges are difficult, and we don't need just a motivational poster to say that we're doing great work, that we actually do need to sit down and start brainstorming, like what do we need to do to get through this week, to get through the next month, and to eventually prepare our kids to move to the next grade. And that's what's so wonderful, is just you walk out with strategies, but you walk out also having this sense of collectiveness, that we're all doing this work towards a common goal.
And Ty, this is your second year participating in Belle. I'm curious, for you personally, what have you gotten out of it? Have there been any, you know, special things you've learned or aha moments, anything like that?
Yeah, so I spent 12 years of my career in a middle school, teaching middle school ELA. And then I went on to do a principal residency where I knew that my challenge would be learning primary. And so I spent a lot of time in kindergarten during my principal residency. We did not have a pre-K. And then fast forward to maybe 4 or 5 years later, and I was told that I was opening an early childhood center with very little exposure to, you know, very limited formal education around early childhood, a real belief that this is important and that we got to get this right, and that this is going to ultimately lead to greater achievement in upper grades, and a real commitment to do that work, but not the background knowledge that I needed to support teachers. So Belle coming along was a godsend, because it has allowed me to be a learner and to learn in a community of other administrators, many of whom are in a similar position as me, who do not have the background in early childhood. And everything that I learned in Belle is an aha, because these were things I had not been exposed to. And I've really learned a lot about childhood development, and I'm just really grateful for that learning. And also the importance of play. And that was something that I hadn't given a lot of thought to prior to my experience with Belle.
Yeah, I think there's such an interesting thread through Ty and Joyce, your reflections on Belle, that reflects VOCEL's approach around bringing best practices, expertise, but then also focusing on resilience through community. Because what we've seen, and it's true with school leaders, it's also true with parents and caregivers, is that research and best practices is one piece of that puzzle. But alone, it's really insufficient, right? For folks to actually transfer that knowledge into practice, it takes that community and the relationships. Some of what Joyce was talking about, like being able to lean on each other and say, this is really hard, might allow everyone to, you know, that stress to go down, and then be able to implement all of what I was talking about, all of that knowledge. So I appreciate you both for sharing those. I want to close us out here in the next couple minutes. So if anyone who is listening in has a question, now is the time to put it in the chat box to make sure that we get it to these leaders. But I also want to ask, and this could go to any of you, if we as a community or as a city do everything right for the youngest learners in our schools, in your schools, what do you think that would mean for the kids or for our city as a whole? I know that's kind of a big picture question, but if we get it right, what difference will it make?
I'd love to jump in on this one.
Go
So
for it.
I finished my doctorate in April, and I reflect on my family in that I have grandparents. I'm half Black and half Mexican. My Black grandparents grew up in Jim Crow, and they came north during the Great Migration. They had 6th and 8th grade educations. My Mexican grandparents immigrated to the United States with their children. My dad was born in Mexico, and they came because there was something intangible that they wanted for their kids that didn't exist in their homeland. The same reasons that my Black grandparents came north, and that was ultimately education. I grew up, in a middle-class home with both of my parents and had access to books, access to education. My parents took me to the library. They took me to the bookstore as a reward. And so growing up for me, even as a female, even as a person of color, there was no limitation to what I could do. I didn't believe that anything was impossible. And getting my doctorate was sort of like, wow, those t-shirts and things that say I am my ancestors' wildest dream. Like truly, I had grandparents who could not have dreamed that a generation out of poverty that, I would be getting my doctorate. And I think that that's, for me, the power of early childhood education, is that I want every single kid in the city, in the world, to not grow up believing that anything is impossible. And for me, the only path to that is education.
All right, who wants to follow that? Hi, thank you so much.
Someone asked me a similar question recently, and I really, just to echo what Ty just said so powerfully, I think the power of getting this right, we're so lucky in education, especially in these current circumstances in the world that we live in, where we hear about so many things that we wish we could change. I truly believe that educators are in one of the only professions that don't have to be reactive to the world we live in. Everyone else, right? Doctors are treating people who are sick. Everyone else is reactive to the circumstances that we live in, but educators are playing this long game. And if we get this right, we can change our current reality. It doesn't have to be a wildest dream for anyone anymore. It can be the status quo, it can be the normal. And I think that that is the power of doing this work well.
Okay, so I did everything my colleague said. When you ask the question, we get it right, what would the city be like? And I'm thinking, when you were talking about the opportunities that we bring to the families, and I thought about my school and I said, wow, look, it's almost like when the city talks about desert places where there's no stores for produce and whatnot. It's also for these opportunities. Like when I go to my middle-class neighborhood where they have everything, when they have everything they are providing to them. And I thought, oh, we got it right. Then everyone are gonna have not just one place to go to, but they're gonna have different places. Like when you go into the middle-class neighborhood where their competition is fierce for the betterment of the population there. And I think we get it right. That's how I envision it. I envision that there's a surplus of different opportunities for students, a surplus for different opportunities for the community. So they're not anymore, we really had to remove those barriers. There's something we have it in the city. And really, you have to go where the people are who need it the most, rather than having the people to go to the places that are far away. So that's how I envision it. I envision it that there's a lot of opportunity in Chicago to really, you want to make a difference. That's what you do. You come like VOCEL to the west side and the south side of Chicago, and you make it happen. and you kind of share your dream with us, and you tell us, we're going to be there with you. You don't have to convince us, we're already there. We just want those opportunities to be brought to us, and we're going to open our communities, and we're going to open our arms, and we're going to be there with you.
Absolutely. I feel confident with the three of you at least leading schools, and right, that the power of those partnerships, that we will get there. And I want to close us out with one question. This will go to Ty and Joyce. This came in from one of our attendees asking, how has Belle improved your leadership or your ability to support early childhood teachers in your school? No worries, Ty. We're glad to have you back. But yes, how has being a part of Belle improved your ability to support early childhood teachers in your school?
I think just on a basic level, I don't often have the answers. When Ty was talking about her educational background, I actually was a high school teacher. So elementary was very different, and pre-K was just wild. I'm not sure what's happening over there. And so for me, this has really been just so helpful, because I often say, hey, I don't have the answer to that. But now I can say, I don't have the answer to that, but I know someone who does. And I can reach out not only to Kyra, who's amazing, but also to any of the other leaders, that I've now gotten in touch with through Belle.
Oh, it looks like we might have lost Ty at a time when she was on deck. But I will share, I think Ty will be okay with me sharing. And I think she's had some similar moments as Joyce with, right, thinking about when my teachers ask me a question, or when my teachers are doing something, how do I respond? And what's the appropriate advice to give to a pre-K teacher? And I remember Ty in one of our workshops having a moment where we were talking about pre-reading skills and what children should be doing a year in advance of when they were going to start, putting together letter sounds. And she said, oh my gosh, I've been asking my teachers to do something that's in tension with what they're supposed to be doing. And so I think it's also some of those moments, right? Those aha moments that we see, as Ty mentioned, being a learner. We can see educators have those, school leaders have those, and parents and caregivers have those, and then change their interactions with children as a result. So I want to thank all of you so much. It's Principal Appreciation Month this month, so how appropriate that we're having this conversation. And to Ty, Joyce, Javier, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, and we will, thank you all. We will finish out here tonight by telling you a little bit more about our Power of Community series, which is closing out here tonight. So you can see the recordings of the Power of Parents and the Power of Teachers on our YouTube channel. So my colleague Anais will put the link in the chat box for you to be able to watch those. They were great conversations, just like tonight's conversation with school leaders. We had a great conversation with parents, and then also with teachers, that you can watch over on VOCEL's YouTube channel. And I want you to know also in leaving tonight that at VOCEL, our mission is to help ensure every child has the foundation to learn, grow, and lead. So just as our school leaders were talking about, making sure it's not exceptional when a child goes on to earn that doctorate degree, but that every child has the foundation to learn, grow, and lead. And so over the next 3 years, we'll be growing our program so that we can impact nearly 2,500 children by 2024, which is compared to less than 400 just a year ago. But that growth is only possible because of our VOCEL village of partners and supporters, donors, investors, a really critical element of that ecosystem of extraordinary adults who are helping young children thrive in Chicago. So already we've raised over $225,000 through this Power of Community campaign. We'd love for you to help us reach our goal of $250,000 by making a gift today via the link in the chat. And we really can't do this work without you. So thank you to all of our sponsors, including our Power of Community presenting sponsors, Lindy and Michael Kaiser, and our Power of School Leaders presenting sponsors, Lindy Hirschsohn and Chris Coetzee. And also to all of you, thank you for joining tonight. We're going to leave the webinar open for a few minutes to answer any questions, additional questions you have, or comments in the chat box. I'm really proud to have you as part of our community, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.